I came to my son-in-law's house for Thanksgiving dinner, bringing a pie, as always, for the family I had created myself. There were 30 people sitting at the table. Laughter, toasts, unfamiliar faces in my home. And he, with a fake smile. "There's no place for you here?" The betrayal hit me like a knife. I didn't argue. I just whispered, "You have 30 days to leave the house I paid for. The consequences will change everything." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The November cold bit through my jacket as I walked up the path to Alma's house, carrying the apple pie I'd baked that morning. Same recipe I'd used for 30 years. The windows glowed warm yellow, voices and laughter spilling out into the dark evening. I'd parked on the street because the driveway was packed. A Mercedes, 2 BMWs, a Tesla. Cars I didn't recognize. New landscaping lined the walkway. Japanese maples in ceramic pots, each one probably worth $300. The patio furniture looked expensive too, all teak and stainless steel. When had they gotten all this? Hosea opened the door before I could knock. His smile stretched wide across his face, but his eyes stayed flat. "Sorry, Neil, but we weren't counting on you. The table's full, 30 people, and there's no room for you." The words came out casual, almost cheerful, like he was commenting on the weather. I stood there with the pie in my hands, my mouth half open. Through the doorway I could see the dining room crammed with strangers, men in polo shirts and khakis, women with wine glasses laughing, nobody I knew. Alma appeared behind her husband. She looked past my shoulder, wouldn't meet my eyes. An empty chair sat against the far wall, right there in plain sight. I could have said something, could have pointed it out. Instead, I set the pie down on the entry table, careful not to let it tip. The ceramic dish made a soft click against the wood. I turned around, walked back down the path. The door closed behind me. No call to wait, no apology, just the clean click of the lock, and then the party sounds continued, like I'd never been there at all. My truck felt like ice when I climbed in. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, forcing myself to breathe slow and steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Techniques I'd learned managing fire emergencies for 35 years. The drive home took 20 minutes. Every red light felt like an hour, 5 years ago. That's when it hit me, sitting at that first stoplight. 5 years ago, I'd sat at Alma's kitchen table, their old apartment's kitchen table, and written the check, $120,000, for the down payment on this house. Hosea had looked me right in the eye. "This means everything to us, Neil. This house, this neighborhood, it's our dream. We'll pay you back when we can, but honestly, you're giving us our future." Alma had hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're the best dad in the world. I don't know how we'd do this without you. This house is going to be where our kids grow up, where you'll have Thanksgiving dinners with us forever." Forever lasted 5 years. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark. I left it that way, walking through rooms lit only by streetlights coming through the windows. My coat stayed on. I dropped into my recliner and stared at the framed photo on the side table. Alma at 7 years old, gap-toothed, holding up a fish we'd caught together. That little girl was gone. Had been for a while, probably. I'd just been too stupid to see it. After an hour, maybe 2, I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked to my office and opened the safe with steady hands. The loan documents sat right where I'd filed them 5 years ago. I pulled them out and spread them across my desk. The overhead light was harsh, made everything look clinical, made everything look clear. I read every word, read them twice. By the third time, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and dies fast. What I felt now was colder, sharper. I'd spent 3 decades running into burning buildings. I knew how to stay calm when everything around you was chaos. I knew how to make a plan, how to execute it. This was just another emergency, different kind of fire, but fire all the same. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a notepad, started writing. Not everything, just the facts, dates, amounts, conversations I could remember, word for word. At the top of the page I wrote, November 28th, 2024, the night I stopped being a fool. My phone sat silent on the desk. I knew it would stay that way. Alma wouldn't call, wouldn't text. She'd made her choice when she stood behind her husband and looked away. Outside, the rain started. Soft at first, then harder. The kind of Portland rain that lasts for days. I kept writing until my hand cramped, until the notepad filled with 2 pages of careful notes. Then I put everything back in the safe except one document, the loan agreement from 2019. That one I left on my desk where I'd see it first thing in the morning. I finally went to bed around 3. Didn't sleep much. Kept seeing that empty chair against the wall. Kept hearing the door close. I woke up in my recliner. Never made it to the bedroom after all. Gray morning light filtered through the windows. The rain had stopped, but the sky hung low and dark. December 1st. My office door stood open. The safe, too. Documents still covered the desk from where I'd left them. My phone sat on the coffee table. Screen black. I picked it up, checked it. Nothing. No missed calls. No text messages. The silence told me everything. I made coffee and carried the mug to my office. Sat down and started reading again. This time, I made notes. Real notes. The loan agreement was 2 pages, printed on Hosea's home computer 5 years ago. The language was vague. Deliberately so, I realize now. Loan amount, $120,000. Repayment terms, per mutual family agreement, to be determined based on financial circumstances and goodwill between parties. Goodwill? I almost laughed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through old messages. Found the ones from 2019. Hosea's texts about how grateful they were, how they'd never forget. Alma's messages with heart emojis and promises about family dinners. Then I checked recent months. The texts got shorter, more distant. Alma stopped asking about my week. Started just sending information. Running late. Can't make it Sunday. Talk later. I made a timeline. Put everything in order. The loan, the promises, the gradual pullback. Thanksgiving wasn't sudden. It was just the first time they'd said it out loud. By mid-December, I had an appointment with Richard Tomlin. He practiced family law downtown, came recommended by another retired fire chief who'd been through a divorce. His office was on the 9th floor of a glass building near the courthouse, parking garage underneath. Tomlin was maybe 50, silver at his temples, reading glasses that he kept pushing up his nose. He read through my documents for 20 minutes without speaking. I sat across from him and watched the rain streak down the windows. "This agreement is deliberately vague," he finally said. "Repaid per mutual family agreement. That's not a payment schedule. It's wishful thinking. But that vagueness cuts both ways. They can't prove it was a gift any more than you can prove it was a loan. Oregon courts look at intent and circumstances. Did you expect repayment?" "I expected respect," I said. "I expected a place at the table I helped buy. Does that count?" He looked at me for a long moment. "In Oregon property law? Maybe. But be warned, Mr. Butler. Win or lose in court, you're going to lose your daughter. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Thanksgiving, about the door closing, about 5 weeks of silence. I already lost her. I just didn't realize it until she closed the door in my face. Tomlin nodded slowly, set the documents down. "Then let me explain what we can do." I drove past Alma's house 3 times over the next 2 weeks. Never stopped, never slowed down too much, just observed. The expensive cars stayed in the driveway. New outdoor Christmas lights hung from the gutters, the kind that cost a fortune, all synchronized and color-changing. A new patio heater sat on the deck. Through the windows I could see a massive television that hadn't been there in October. They were spending money like they had it, to burn. My money, probably. Or money they'd borrowed, thinking they'd never have to explain where the down payment came from. I kept notes. Dates, times, observations. Not because Tomlin asked me to. Because that's what you do when you're building a case. When you're gathering evidence. When you're preparing for the moment everything changes. Christmas came and went. My phone stayed quiet. I spent the day alone, which wasn't new. What was new was the notebook I kept adding to. The way I'd started seeing everything clearly instead of through the fog of hope I'd been living in. New Year's Eve, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my notes spread out in front of me, calculating interest on $120,000 over 5 years when my phone buzzed. Alma. First message in 5 weeks. "Happy New Year, Dad." 4 words. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that anything had happened. Just 4 words, probably sent to her whole contact list. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I typed back, "Happy New Year, Alma." I didn't add anything else. Didn't need to. I spoke to the empty kitchen instead. This is the last one where you get to pretend everything's fine. On January 2nd, I called Tomlin's office and told them I was ready to move forward. They scheduled me for the following week. Official engagement, formal retainer, case filing, all of it. I hung up and looked around my house. Everything here I'd paid for with my own work. 35 years climbing ladders, running into smoke, making split-second decisions that kept people alive. I'd earned every dollar, spent it carefully, saved it thoughtfully, given it generously when my daughter needed it, and she'd close the door in my face. Outside, the rain started again. I watched it fall and felt nothing but cold certainty. This wasn't about the money anymore. Maybe it never had been. This was about respect, about dignity, about refusing to disappear quietly just because it was more convenient for everyone else. I pulled out the loan document one more time, read Hosea's signature, Alma's too, right there as a witness. They'd signed this thinking I'd never ask for it back, thinking I'd just accept whatever scraps of attention they felt like giving me, thinking I was old and tired and done. They were wrong. Christmas morning came gray and quiet. I sat in my living room with coffee, watching snow dust the street outside. My phone buzzed once around 10. Alma. "Merry Christmas, Dad." 3 words. No photo of grandkids I didn't have. No invitation I wasn't getting. Just 3 words. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I typed back, "Merry Christmas." 2 words, even less than hers. That's what we'd become. Strangers trading empty greetings. I set the phone down and picked up the composition book. Pages of notes now, dates, observations, calculations. Christmas was just another day to add to the timeline. Another day they didn't call, didn't invite me over, didn't acknowledge that anything was wrong. The snow kept falling. I stayed inside. New Year's Day felt the same. Quiet house, no plans. I spent the morning looking at Richard Tomlin's business card, turning it over in my fingers. On January 2nd, I drove downtown to his office. The parking garage was nearly empty, most people still on holiday. The elevator ride to the 9th floor felt longer than I remembered. This time, I wasn't coming for advice. I was coming to hire him. Tomlin had coffee waiting. He pushed the retainer agreement across his desk. I read every word, then signed on the bottom line, and wrote a check for $5,000. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but my signature came out steady. "First, we send a formal demand letter," he explained, sliding a yellow legal pad toward himself and making notes. "We'll claim either full debt repayment of $120,000 plus interest, which brings it to about $145, or recognition of co-ownership at roughly 40% equity stake. If they refuse both options, we file a lawsuit for partition and sale or equitable interest determination." He looked up at me over his reading glasses. "This will take months, maybe a year, and it will be painful for everyone involved. The relationship is already destroyed," I said. "I'm just recovering what belongs to me." He nodded slowly, wrote something else on his pad. "I'll start drafting the demand letter this week." Mid-January, Tomlin arranged for an independent appraiser to evaluate the house. I didn't go, couldn't risk being seen there, but waited at home for the report. It came a week later, delivered to my mailbox in a manila envelope. I spread it across my kitchen table. 20 pages of detailed analysis, photos, comparables. The number that mattered was on page 3. Current market value $380,000. They'd bought it in 2019 for $320. With the remaining mortgage balance of $180, the net equity was $200,000. I got out my calculator, started working through the numbers. My $120,000 represented 60% of their original down payment and closing costs. Even accounting for 5 years of mortgage payments on their end, my contribution should give me a significant stake. Maybe 35, 40% of the current equity. That could mean $70,000, $80,000 if the house were sold. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about making them acknowledge what they'd taken. Late January, I called Tom Chen, a realtor I'd known from the fire department. He'd helped me buy this house years back, stayed in touch after I retired. We met for coffee at a place near his office. "I need a favor," I said after we'd caught up on department gossip. You have access to public mortgage records, right? He pulled out his laptop. Sure. What property? I gave him the address, watched his fingers move across the keyboard, watched the screen populate with information. Here's something interesting. He turned the laptop so I could see. They refinanced last February, took out an additional $60,000 in equity. See these numbers? They went from owing 140 to 180. Cash out, refinance. They probably used it for that renovation you mentioned. New kitchen, new deck, fancy furniture. My jaw tightened. I kept my voice level. So they could access equity for granite countertops, but not to pay back the man who bought them the house in the first place? Tom looked at me, picked up on something in my tone. Everything okay, Neil? Everything's fine, just gathering information. I drove home and added the refinancing details to my composition book. Then I called Tomlin. I just found out they refinanced a year ago, I told him. Pulled out $60,000. While not telling me anything because they won't even talk to me, they were accessing my equity for their upgrades. Silence on the other end. Then, this actually helps us. It shows they had the ability to access equity, but chose not to repay you. It demonstrates intent to deprive you of what's rightfully yours. I'll include this in the demand letter. It strengthens our position considerably. That night, I sat in my office with everything spread before me. Wire transfers from 2019, the vague loan agreement with Hosea's signature, appraisal reports, refinancing records from Tom's search, 2 months of documentation, 2 months of being methodical, patient, observant. Now it was time to strike. I called Tomlin the next morning. Prepare the demand letter. Send it certified mail. I want them to have to sign for it. You're certain? The observation phase is over. Time for the first move. Tomlin called me early February. The letter's going out today. Certified mail. They'll have it in 3 business days. I marked it on my calendar. February 5th, the letter goes out. February 8th, they sign for it. February 9th at the latest. I waited. On the 8th, my phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Alma's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Dad! Her voice came out shaky on the edge of tears. What is this? What is this letter? It's exactly what it says, a demand for repayment or recognition of ownership. You can't be serious. You're taking us to court? Over money you gave us as a gift? I gave you a loan, with a signed agreement, that you've ignored for 5 years. We haven't ignored it. We needed time. We were going to pay you back eventually. You know we were. Her voice rose, desperate. How can you do this? I'm your daughter. I thought about Thanksgiving, the door closing, 5 weeks of silence, the empty chair I could see through the doorway. Then maybe you should have treated me like your father. She started crying. Real tears or performed ones, I couldn't tell any more. Please don't do this. We can work something out. Just drop the lawyer. Let's handle this as a family. We tried handling it as a family. You closed the door in my face. That was... She stopped, started again. That was Hosea's decision. I wanted you there. I did. But you didn't say anything. You stood behind him and looked away. Silence. Then, please, Dad, give us a chance to make this right. The letter gives you exactly that. 30 days to respond. Either pay what you owe or acknowledge co-ownership. Those are your options. She hung up without saying anything else. 2 hours later, another call. I didn't recognize the number, let it go to voicemail. Pulled it up a minute later, Hosea's voice tight and angry. You made a big mistake, old man. Coming after us like this? After everything we've done for you? You think you can just lawyer up and take our house? Think again. We've got our own attorney now, and he's going to tear your case apart. You gave us that money as a gift. Everyone knows it. And when we're done, you won't have a relationship with your daughter or a single dollar to show for this stunt. Call off your lawyer, or you're going to regret this. I saved the voicemail, sent it to Tomlin with a text. Exhibit A. He called me 10 minutes later. Well, that was impressively stupid of him. Threatening voicemails don't play well in court. How are you holding up? Fine. Your daughter called you? Yes. What did she say? She cried, said we should handle it as a family, that it was her husband's decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving, not hers. And I told her the letter gives them 30 days, balls in their court. Tomlin was quiet for a moment. You're doing well, Neil. Better than most people in your situation. This gets harder before it gets easier. I know. A week later, the response came. Not from Alma or Hosea directly, from their attorney. Marcus Gray, according to the letterhead. Big firm downtown, 3 partners, aggressive reputation. I read the letter twice, then called Tomlin. Let me guess, he said. Lots of aggressive language. Claims that it was obviously a gift. Threats about frivolous litigation. How'd you know? Because Marcus Gray is predictable. He goes for intimidation first. What exactly does it say? I read sections aloud. Your client's baseless and vindictive claim, no legitimate expectation of repayment, attempting to extort money from his own daughter. If you proceed with litigation, we will pursue sanctions and attorney's fees. This frivolous action will be met with the full force of our legal team. Standard bluster, Tomlin said. Notice they don't actually address the substance. They don't explain the written agreement. Don't explain the refinancing. They just attack your character and make threats. That tells me they're worried. So what's next? We file the lawsuit, partition action claiming co-ownership and requesting court-ordered sale or buyout. I'll have it ready by end of week. That Friday, Tomlin emailed me the draft complaint. 22 pages. Every detail we'd gathered. Wire transfer records. The signed agreement. Appraisal showing current value. Evidence of the refinancing. A timeline of their increasing distance from me. Hosea's threatening voicemail submitted as evidence of his character and credibility. I read it 3 times. Each time, I felt the same cold certainty I'd felt back in November when I opened my safe. This was right. Not easy. Not pleasant. But right. At the bottom of the email, review and approve for Monday filing. I clicked reply. Typed 1 word. Approve. Then I sat back in my chair, looked around my office. The house was quiet. Had been for months. Would stay that way probably. But at least now I wasn't being quiet about it. Tomlin called Monday morning. It's done. Case number 25M CV03847. Filed in Multnomah County Circuit Court. Butler versus Butler and Butler. Hearing my daughter's name twice in a case caption, once as mine, once as my opponent, hit harder than I expected, but I kept my voice level. The preliminary hearing is set for April 15th. We have 6 weeks to build our case, and they'll spend that time trying to tear you down. Let them try, I said. I've spent 35 years running into burning buildings. I'm not afraid of Marcus Gray. But I wasn't going to wait passively either. I called Jake Chen, a former colleague from the fire department, who'd moved into loan processing at a regional bank. We met for coffee at a diner out near Gresham, away from downtown where we might run into people we knew. Neil, I can't access actual credit reports. That's illegal without consent, he said after I explained what I needed. But court judgments, liens, property records, those are public. If someone's been sued or has penalties against them, I can find that. Hypothetically, I said, if you were looking at someone with a mortgage, what other debt would show up in public records? He gave me a knowing look. Judgments from collection agencies, vehicle loans filed with the DMV, tax liens, anything that went through the courts. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Jake, found some things. Can we talk? We met again at the same diner. He spread printouts across the table between our coffee mugs. Your hypothetical person has a judgment against him from Capital One Collections. $35,000 filed 8 months ago. Also a vehicle loan through Chase for $48,000, secured last March. That's a lot of debt to carry alongside a mortgage. I studied the numbers, added them mentally to their $2,400 monthly mortgage payment. Interesting, especially for someone who claims they can't afford to repay a family loan. Jake folded up the papers and slid them across to me. Didn't ask any more questions. The following week, I spent 3 hours at the Multnomah County Clerk's office, going through public records on the house. Found the refinancing documents from a year ago. Started reading line by line. Buried in the paperwork, 2 notices of civil penalties from the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation, both against Hosea. Both for material misrepresentation of income during loan application process. $500 each. Small fines. Large implications. I photographed every page with my phone. Tomlin would want to see this. Hosea hadn't just been irresponsible with money. He'd committed fraud to get better loan terms. It established a pattern, made his credibility questionable. Mid-March, Tomlin called with a warning. Gray filed discovery requests. He wants your medical records, particularly mental health. He's also deposing people who know you and Alma. He's building a narrative. Lonely widower, estranged from his daughter, using the legal system to force his way back into her life. I expected this, I said. What do we do? Get ahead of it. Voluntary psychiatric evaluation from an independent expert. Get a clean report before Gray can paint you as unstable. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Rebecca Foster, a forensic psychiatrist who did legal evaluations. Her office was in a medical building near OHSU, neutral territory. The session lasted 2 hours. Mr. Butler, these questions may seem personal, but I need to assess your emotional state and decision-making capacity. When you decided to pursue legal action against your daughter, what was your primary motivation? Justice, I said. I contributed $120,000 toward their house. They excluded me from their lives and refused to acknowledge that contribution. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I'm recovering what belongs to me. Do you feel this decision was made in anger or grief? Neither. It was made after 2 months of careful consideration. I am a retired fire chief. I don't make impulsive decisions, especially important ones. She asked about my wife, about loneliness, about whether I felt Alma owed me attention or affection. I answered everything honestly, without defensiveness. Told her I missed my daughter, but wouldn't accept being discarded after being useful. A week later, the written evaluation arrived. I read it 3 times. Mr. Butler demonstrates full cognitive capacity, logical thought processes, and appropriate emotional regulation. His decision to pursue legal remedies for financial disputes shows rational problem-solving rather than vindictive or impaired judgment. No evidence of depression, anxiety disorders, or cognitive decline. I filed it with my other documents. Late March, I sat at my kitchen table, organizing everything into 3 piles. My evidence, Jake's printouts about the debt, the fraud penalties I'd photographed, Dr. Foster's evaluation, Gray's discovery requests, invasive questions about my wife's death, about whether I felt neglected, about my mental health. Tomlin's preliminary hearing brief, 40 pages arguing for recognition of my equity stake based on the loan agreement and their subsequent actions. I'd spent a month building ammunition while absorbing attacks. 3 weeks until the hearing. I picked up my phone and texted Tomlin a photo of the fraud penalty documents. His response came back immediately. This is excellent. This changes the narrative. See you in court. The morning of April 15th, I put on the suit I'd worn to my retirement ceremony 3 years ago. Dark gray, still fit well. Drove downtown and found parking in the courthouse garage. Went through security, emptied my pockets into the tray, walked through the metal detector. Courtroom 6 was on the 3rd floor. Tomlin waited outside in the hallway, briefcase in hand. Ready? He asked. Yes. We walked in together. Marcus Gray was already there at the defense table with Hosea and Alma. She looked smaller than I remembered, hands folded in her lap. Hosea sat beside her, jaw tight, staring straight ahead. He was wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Probably bought it special for today. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. Didn't look at them directly. Kept my focus on the judge's empty bench. Judge Hartwell entered at 9 sharp. Woman in her 50s, reading glasses on a chain, reputation for being no nonsense in financial disputes. Everyone stood. She took her seat and gestured for us to do the same. Case 25, CV 03847. Butler versus Butler and Butler. Preliminary hearing on plaintiff's claim of equitable interest in real property. She looked over her glasses at both tables. This is a family matter that's ended up in my courtroom. That's unfortunate, but here we are. Mr. Tomlin, you may proceed. Tomlin stood, laid out the facts crisply. The $120,000 wire transfer in 2019. The signed agreement, vague as it was, acknowledging the money as a loan. 5 years without repayment or communication about repayment. The refinancing that extracted $60,000 in equity while I was being excluded from family events. The fraud penalties that showed a pattern of financial dishonesty. Gray objected 3 times. Irrelevant. Prejudicial? Outside the scope of preliminary determination. Judge Hartwell overruled him each time. I'll decide what's relevant, Mr. Gray. When Tomlin finished, Gray stood up. Theatrical gestures, raised voice. Your Honor, this is a vindictive action by an elderly man who feels slighted by his daughter's busy life. The money was clearly a gift. What father charges interest on helping his daughter buy a home? My clients have character statements from neighbors, colleagues, friends who will testify that Mr. Butler has become increasingly isolated and fixated on perceived abandonment. He slid a stack of papers across to the clerk. Character letters, probably. People who didn't know anything about what happened. Tomlin stood again. Your Honor, we have a psychiatric evaluation conducted by Dr. Rebecca Foster, a court-recognized forensic expert, showing Mr. Butler is fully competent and his actions are rational, not emotional. We also have documentation that the defendants accessed significant equity through refinancing but made no effort to repay the plaintiff, despite the written agreement. Judge Hartwell spent 10 minutes reading through documents. The courtroom stayed silent. I could hear Alma breathing from the table behind me. Fast, shallow. Finally, Hartwell looked up. Here's what I see. There's a written agreement, however vague. There's a substantial sum of money that changed hands. There's evidence the defendants had means to repay, but chose not to. And there's evidence of prior financial misrepresentation that calls their credibility into question. She looked at Gray. This case has sufficient merit to proceed. I'm ordering mandatory mediation for May 10th. If you can't resolve this between yourselves, we'll schedule a full trial. The gavel came down. Gray started to speak. Your Honor, we object. You can object at trial, Mr. Gray. We're done here. We stood. The judge left. I turned toward the door. That's when I saw Hosea walking toward me, Gray trying to grab his arm. You think you've won something, old man? Hosea said, voice low but sharp. You're destroying your own family for money. Alma's never going to forgive you for this. I looked at him directly for the first time. I'm not doing this for forgiveness. I'm doing it for what's right. Tomlin stepped between us. Mr. Butler, that's enough. Mr. Gray, control your client. We left through the elevator, didn't speak until we were outside the courthouse. That went well, Tomlin said. Better than I expected. Hartwell saw through Gray's performance. The fraud penalties helped. What happens at mediation? We sit in a room with a neutral mediator and try to reach a settlement. They'll probably offer something, maybe 40, 50,000, hoping you'll go away. Question is, will you take it? I'll consider whatever's fair, I said, but I won't accept being dismissed. That evening, my phone buzzed. Alma, text message. Please stop this. We can work it out. Don't let it go to mediation. Let's just talk, the three of us. I set the phone face down on the table, stared at it for a full minute, then picked it up and typed, I'll see you at mediation, May 10th. An hour later, Tomlin called. Just got word from Gray's office. They want to know our bottom line before mediation. They're nervous. Good, I said. Let them be nervous. I hung up and pulled out my files again, started reviewing everything for the next round. The weeks between the hearing and mediation crawled by. I spent them preparing with Tomlin, reviewing every document one more time. Early May arrived. The mediation was scheduled for the 10th. I drove downtown to a professional building near Pioneer Courthouse Square. The mediation office was on the 4th floor, deliberately neutral space, beige walls, generic landscape paintings, conference table with 8 chairs. Patricia Chen, the court-appointed mediator, greeted everyone at the door. Woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, calm face that suggested she'd seen every family dispute imaginable. She gestured us to the table. I sat on one side with Tomlin. Across from us, Alma and Hosea took their seats with Marcus Gray. Alma's face looked puffy, swollen, like she'd been crying for days. Hosea sat rigid, jaw clenched tight. Gray appeared confident, almost smug. Patricia opened with standard procedural explanation. Thank you all for coming. Mediation is voluntary and confidential. My role is to help you find common ground. She turned to me first. Mr. Butler, let's start with you. What would constitute acceptable resolution from your perspective? I'd prepared my answer, rehearsed it, Full repayment of my $120,000 contribution, plus 5 years of reasonable interest at 3%. Total $145,000. Alternatively, recognition of my 40% ownership stake in the property with immediate sale and proportional division of proceeds. Patricia wrote this down without expression. Across the table, Alma's face crumpled. Hosea leaned forward. That's not a negotiation. That's a demand. I looked at him directly. You demanded I leave your doorstep on Thanksgiving. Consider this my counter-demand. Patricia called for a brief caucus. Gray took Hosea and Alma to a side room. They were gone 20 minutes. When they came back, Gray was smiling. After careful consideration, my clients are prepared to offer a compromise that demonstrates their good faith. They'll pay Mr. Butler $30,000 over 5 years, $500 per month. Given their financial constraints and family obligations, this represents a genuine effort to address his concerns. Patricia turned to me. Mr. Butler, your response? I didn't even look at Tomlin. No, that's 25% of what I'm owed, stretched over 5 years with no interest and no guarantee of payment. It's an insult. Gray's theatrical voice rose. Mr. Butler, you're being unreasonable. My clients are offering what they can afford. They could afford to refinance and pull out $60,000 for granite countertops and hardwood floors. They can afford a luxury SUV with a $48,000 loan. Don't tell me they can't afford to repay what they actually owe. Alma suddenly spoke up. Her voice shook. You're destroying our family. You're willing to take everything from us. Our home, our security, our future, just because you felt excluded from one dinner? One Thanksgiving dinner and you're trying to ruin our lives? What kind of father does that to his own daughter? Something broke in me. Not into rage, into hard truth. I raised my voice for the first time in 8 months. I'm destroying the family? I stood on your doorstep while 30 strangers ate dinner in the house I bought you. You closed the door in my face, Alma. You and Hosea made the choice to exclude me from your lives. I'm not punishing you. I'm refusing to let you steal from me. There's a difference. The room went silent. Even Gray looked uncertain. Patricia called for another break, met with each side separately. When she returned to the main room, her expression was grim. I've met with both parties separately, and I've explored multiple potential compromises. I don't see a path to agreement here. The positions are too far apart, and frankly, there's too much emotional damage for productive negotiation. I'm formally ending this mediation as unsuccessful. We gathered our things. Tomlin and I left first. In the parking garage, he was blunt. We're going to trial. Judge Hartwell will set the date when she receives the mediator's report. Probably July. Are you ready for this? Full trial means multiple days. Witnesses. Cross-examination. It gets intense. I've been ready since November, I said. Let's finish this. The next month passed in preparation. Tomlin filed more motions. Gray filed counters. The trial date came through. July 7th. Mid-June, I was home reviewing witness lists when my phone rang. Sandra, my sister, calling from Seattle, where she taught high school English. Neil, it's Sandra. I saw Alma's Facebook post about the lawsuit. She's painting herself as the victim, asking for prayers and support. I want you to know, I'm on your side. I was there in 2019 when you gave them that money. I remember Hosea promising to pay you back once we get on our feet. Those were his exact words. If you need me to testify, I will. Something shifted in my chest. Relief, maybe. Or just the feeling of not being completely alone in this fight. Sandra, they're going to come after you. Alma will call, try to make you feel guilty for taking my side against your niece. Her voice was steel. Let them try. I raised Alma alongside you after Mom died. I know what loyalty means, even if she's forgotten. I'll be there when you need me. After we hung up, I called Tomlin. Add Sandra Butler to the witness list. She was there when the loan was made. She heard Hosea's promises. That's perfect, he said, corroborating testimony from a family member who was physically present. Gray can't dismiss that. July 7th arrived hot and clear. I put on my suit and drove downtown early. Found parking, went through courthouse security, took the elevator up. Courtroom 6 again. Same room as the preliminary hearing, but this felt different. Final. The judge's bench looked higher. The gallery had a few people I didn't recognize. Law students, maybe, or court watchers. Tomlin was already there, organizing files on our table. Across the aisle, Gray was doing the same. Hosea sat beside him, looking pale. Alma wasn't there yet. She came in 5 minutes before 9, walked past me without looking, sat down next to her husband. Judge Hartwell entered. We stood. She took her seat and reviewed her notes for a moment before looking up. Case 25, a CV 03847. Butler versus Butler and Butler. We're here for trial on plaintiff's claim of equitable interest. Mr. Tomlin, call your first witness. Tomlin presented the documentary evidence first. Wire transfer records showing the $120,000 going to Hosea and Alma's account. The signed loan agreement. The refinancing paperwork. The fraud penalties from the state. Every piece of paper I'd gathered over 8 months. Then he called Sandra. She walked to the witness stand in a navy dress, looking composed, took the oath, sat down. Tomlin's questions were straightforward. Ms. Butler, were you present when your brother provided the funds for the house purchase? Yes. I was at his kitchen table in June 2019 when he wrote the check. Did you hear any conversation about repayment? Hosea said, "We'll pay you back once we get on our feet." Those were his exact words. Was there any indication this was intended as a gift? None. Neil specifically said he wanted it documented as a loan. Hosea agreed and said he'd type up something formal. Gray cross-examined her, tried to suggest she was biased. Sandra didn't flinch. I'm telling the truth. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. After Sandra stepped down, Tomlin called me. I walked to the stand, got sworn in, took my seat. The questions covered everything. The loan, the Thanksgiving rejection, my decision to pursue legal action, my attempts to maintain the relationship. Gray's cross-examination was aggressive. Isn't it true you're doing this because you're angry at being excluded from one family dinner? No. I'm doing this because they took my money and refused to acknowledge the obligation. You expect us to believe a father would sue his own daughter over money? I expect you to believe a man would pursue justice when he's been stolen from. Then Gray called Hosea. That's when everything shifted. Hosea took the stand, looking defiant. Gray walked him through their version, how the money was a gift, how they'd always planned to help me in my old age as repayment. How I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding about Thanksgiving. Then Tomlin stood for cross-examination. Mr. Butler, Hosea, to avoid confusion, you testified this was a gift, but you signed a document calling it a loan, correct? It was just paperwork for Neil's records. Paperwork you drafted yourself, acknowledging debt? It was informal, family stuff. Did you tell the mortgage company about this $120,000 gift when you applied for your original loan? Hosea hesitated. I don't remember. You don't remember telling them where your down payment came from? They didn't ask for specifics. Tomlin pulled out a document. Your loan application from 2019. Line 17 asks, source of down payment. You wrote, savings and sale of previous property. You didn't mention a gift or loan from your father-in-law, did you? Hosea's face went red. It was essentially our savings because we knew he'd given it to us. So you misrepresented the source of funds to secure better loan terms? Gray objected. Judge Hartwell overruled. Tomlin pressed harder. And when you refinanced last year, pulling out $60,000 in equity built partly from Neil's contribution, did you contact him about repayment then? We planned to eventually. Eventually? While buying a $48,000 SUV? We needed transportation. You needed transportation, but you didn't need to repay your debt? No answer. Hosea just stared at his hands. Judge Hartwell called for a recess, said she needed 2 weeks to review all the evidence and testimony. We'd reconvene for her ruling on July 21st. I left the courthouse and drove home. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. You think you won something today? Wait until the judge rules against you. Then you'll see what happens to people who try to destroy families. Remember, we know where you live. I screenshot it, forwarded it to Tomlin with a note. Evidence of character. Then blocked the number. Went back to my notes. 2 weeks until we'd know the outcome. But after watching Hosea on the stand, after hearing his own words trap him, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Certainty. The 2 weeks between testimony and verdict felt longer than the entire 9 months before it. I stayed home mostly, waiting. Then Tomlin called, voice urgent. Hosea just tried to list the house for sale. He contacted a realtor this morning, wants a quick cash sale before the verdict. He's trying to liquidate and disappear with the money. I felt cold anger spike through me. Can he do that? Legally? Not anymore. I filed an emergency motion for a preliminary injunction this afternoon. Judge Hartwell granted it within 2 hours. There's now a legal hold on the property. No sale, no refinancing, no transfer without court approval. The realtor's been notified. If Hosea tries to proceed, he'll be in contempt of court. I thanked him and hung up. Sat there thinking about Hosea scrambling, desperate, trying to hide what he'd already stolen. The thought gave me no pleasure. 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on my front door. I opened it. Hosea stood there, alone. No Alma, no Marcus Gray. He looked broken, unshaven, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Eyes red from exhaustion or tears or both. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. Just the two of us, no lawyers, no court. I considered refusing, but curiosity won. I stepped aside, gestured toward the living room. We sat. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable, heavy. Finally he spoke. I'll give you $50,000, cash, right now, today. I can have it in your hands by this evening. Just withdraw the lawsuit. We'll sign whatever you want, saying you're released from any claims. We can end this. I studied him. This was what desperation looked like up close. For the first time in 9 months, he was acknowledging I had power, that I was owed something. But the offer was still insulting, still trying to shortchange me. And more than that, looking at this broken man sitting in my living room, I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, just emptiness. No. Neil, please, we're family. We can work this out without destroying each other. If I take $50,000 and walk away, nothing changes. You still believe you can treat people like they're disposable and negotiate your way out when there are consequences. The court will decide what I'm owed, and you'll pay it. That's how this ends. His face hardened. You're really going to take everything from us. The house, our savings, everything we've built. You took my dignity. You closed a door in my face on Thanksgiving while strangers ate in the house I paid for. This is just making it equal. He stood, walked to my door, turned back. Alma will never forgive you for this. You know that, right? You'll spend the rest of your life alone, knowing you destroyed your relationship with your only daughter over money. I met his eyes. She stopped being my daughter when she let you shut me out of her life. What's left to forgive? He left without another word. That evening, my phone buzzed. Text from Alma. You won, Dad. You took everything from me. My home, my security, my future. I hope you're satisfied. I hope it was worth losing your daughter forever. I stared at the message for a long time. Could have responded with anger, with all the justifications I'd built up over 9 months, with the hurt I'd carried since November. Instead, I deleted it, didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The relationship had ended on Thanksgiving. This was just the paperwork. 2 days later, Judge Hartwell issued her written ruling. Tomlin called to read it to me. You're recognized as owner of 35% of the property's equity. She gave partial credit for their mortgage payments over 5 years, which is why it's not the full 40% you claimed. But here's the important part. She's ordering the house sold at public auction with proceeds divided proportionally after paying off the mortgage. And they have to pay your court costs, $18,000. 35%. What does that mean in actual money? Based on current appraisal of $380,000 minus the mortgage balance of $180,000, that's $200,000 in equity. 35% of that is $70,000, plus your $18,000 in court costs. You're looking at $88,000 total, maybe more depending on sale price. And them? They get the remaining 65% of equity, about $130,000, minus their legal fees and court costs. After they pay off their other debts, they'll have very little left. This is a complete victory, Neil. Hartwell validated your entire claim. That evening I sat alone at my kitchen table. The written judgment lay in front of me. I read through it once, twice, 3 times. Official language, legal citations, the judge's findings that I'd proven my case, that I was right, I'd won. After 9 months of fighting, I'd proven I was right. I'd get my money back. Justice had been served. But sitting there in the quiet, I didn't feel victorious. Just empty. Hollow. I thought about the framed photo in my office. Alma at 7 holding up that fish we'd caught. That girl was gone. The woman who remained had chosen Hosea over me. I picked up the judgment, folded it carefully, filed it in my document folder with all the other papers from this case. Justice had been served. Now I had to figure out how to live with what justice cost. Early August, the house went to auction. Public sale, courthouse steps, standard procedure for court-ordered liquidations. I didn't attend. Tomlin handled everything. Called me that afternoon with the result. Sold for $375,000. Slightly below appraisal, but reasonable for a forced sale. The math worked out to $68,000 for my 35% share, plus $18,000 in court costs. Total, $86,250. They got the rest, about $127,000, before their legal fees and debts ate through most of it. The check arrived 2 weeks later. I deposited it without ceremony. Paid Tomlin's final bill. What remained went into my savings account. Money I'd loaned 5 years ago, now returned with interest through the legal system. I should have felt something, relief, vindication, satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing. One afternoon in late August, I drove past what used to be Alma's house. Curiosity, maybe, or just confirming it was really over. The new owners had already started changes. Different mailbox, fresh paint on the trim. The Japanese maples Hosea bought were gone. I sat in my truck across the street for a few minutes, tried to remember Thanksgiving, walking up that path with the pie. Felt like years ago instead of 9 months. Then I drove home. The following week an envelope arrived, handwritten address, no return label. I recognized Alma's writing, opened it carefully. A single page, also handwritten. Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. Maybe you'll throw it away without looking, but I need to write it anyway. We're renting a small apartment now in Beaverton, 2 bedrooms. It's what we can afford after paying off the credit cards and the car loan. We have about $20,000 left from the sale. That's what 5 years of marriage and building a life comes down to. Hosea is working 2 jobs. I picked up extra shifts. We're surviving. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty. I made my choices. I stood behind him when I should have stood beside you. I let him close that door. I know that now. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I forgive you either. Maybe we're both right and both wrong. Maybe that's just how these things work when families break. But I wanted you to know, I remember. I remember you teaching me to ride a bike. I remember the fishing trips. I remember you showing up at every school event, even when Mom couldn't. I remember you being there when it mattered. I forgot that for a while. Let Hosea convince me you were just being difficult, that you didn't understand our lives were busy. I believed him because it was easier than standing up to him. I was wrong. This doesn't fix anything, doesn't change what happened. But I wanted you to know that somewhere in the wreckage, your daughter still exists, even if we never speak again. Alma, I read it 3 times, sat with it for an hour. She wasn't apologizing, not really. But she was acknowledging, recognizing. Maybe that was as close as we'd ever get to resolution. I folded the letter carefully, put it in the document folder with the judgment and all the other papers. Evidence that something real had existed once, even if it didn't anymore. I didn't write back, didn't call. Maybe someday, maybe not. The door between us had closed. She'd helped shut it, and I'd locked it from the other side. Whether it would ever open again wasn't something I could answer yet. But I kept the letter. That meant something. Late that evening, I sat in my office, pulled out the framed photo of Alma at 7 years old, gap-toothed, and proud with that fish in her hands. I'd kept it facing down since November, unable to look at it. Now I set it upright on my desk again. The girl in that photo was gone. The woman she'd become had hurt me in ways I couldn't forgive yet, but the memory of that girl, of who we'd been together, that was still mine. The case had proven I was owed money and respect. The verdict had given me both. What it couldn't give me back was her. Maybe it never could have. Maybe the relationship had been dying for years, and Thanksgiving just made it visible. I'd chosen justice over family, made the calculation that self-respect mattered more than reconciliation. Most people would say I was wrong, that you don't sue your own daughter. That money isn't worth losing your only child. They might be right, but they didn't stand on that doorstep, didn't watch 30 strangers occupy the space that should have been mine, didn't spend 5 years being taken for granted. I'd made the only choice I could live with, won the case, recovered my investment, proven my point, and lost my daughter in the process, though truthfully, I'd lost her long before I ever hired Tomlin. The photo stared back at me. 7-year-old Alma, frozen in time before everything got complicated, before Hosea, before the house, before Thanksgiving, when being her father was simple and clear and enough. I touched the frame gently. Then I stood up and turned off the office light, walked to my bedroom. Tomorrow would be the same as today. Quiet house, empty rooms, no phone calls from family I no longer had. But I could look at myself in the mirror, could sleep without the weight of being used and discarded, could wake up knowing I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. Justice had cost me everything, but it had also given me back the one thing I'd lost on that November doorstep, my dignity. That would have to be enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.